going here in a minute. So, Jeff, do you want to read, or do you want me to read the public notice?
Say that one more time, Kimberly. You cut out.
Do you want me to read, or you want to read the public notice?
If you have it pulled up and are willing, have at it.
Okay. The zoning public notice of the Zoning Board of Appeals hearing is held remotely on Thursday, December 3rd, 2020, 7:30 p.m. as permitted by Executive Order 2020-07, which is signed by Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker on Monday, March 16, 2020, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. To participate remotely, download the Zoom Cloud Meeting app, and then enter the ID number and password, or call 312-626-6799, or tune into the https://www.youtube.com/user/Blue Island Television on Blue Island TV. Roll call, please.
Kimberly Byrne.
Here.
Jeff Atwell here. Ron Bloom.
Here.
Mike Sinde.
Here.
And I believe absent is Joseph Martin. And did we have one more? Eric Frausto is no longer? I'm not sure.
We don't have any final word on that yet, but he's absent.
Okay.
Thank you. Howard, do we have any public comments? Is Howard on?
I don't show Howard here.
Okay.
He just disappeared.
Was he on?
I thought I saw him, no?
Was that the 301 number?
No,
That's me.
That's Kimberly.
Oh, okay. Then no, I don't know.
I know the first meeting went
There you go.
over, well, it just went right all the way till 7:29 or thereabouts, so.
Give him a minute to come back. Well, I tell you what, let's keep going. We can come back to public comment if there are any. Old business, do I have a motion to approve the CBA meeting minutes for November 5th?
I so move.
A second?
I'll second. Mrs. Ron?
Roll call?
Kimberly Byrne.
Aye.
Jeff Atwell. Aye. Ron Bloom.
Aye.
Mike Sinde.
Aye.
Motion carries, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. New business. First of all, I want to thank Howard for, I don't know if you all had a chance to watch the planning meeting. For those who didn't, we tried, I had heard some comments based on the length of the meeting last, the Affilia's banquets, and agreed, unfortunately, because we start at 7:30, if our meetings go long, they can go long, unfortunately, into the evening. I had suggested to Howard, is it possible, so now that this is the end of the year, would it be possible to see if we could potentially move our meetings back a half an hour, which would force the request basically to ask planning to see if they could move it back a half an hour. At this point, that's not doable, so we will continue on with our 7:30 meetings. Howard, it looks like you're on.
Yes, I'm on.
Was there any public comment? Did you receive any public comment?
No public comments for tonight.
Okay. What I was just saying that I wanted to thank you for the effort to try and see if we could move the meeting back a half an hour by asking
Right.
the planning committee to move back a half hour. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that. And Howard, since some of my comments were basically going to repeat to some of your comments that you made at the planning committee regarding the training, why don't you go ahead and go ahead with number 2, the new business.
Okay. Number 2. Okay. What did the group already approve the minutes?
Yes.
Who had the first? Who proposed it to approve the minutes?
I moved, seconded by Ron Bloom.
Okay, Jeffrey Atwell, Ron Bloom. I guess unanimously, right? 4-0.
Correct.
Yes.
Joseph Martin should be calling in. I communicated with him before, maybe like an hour ago. But currently we have Michael, Sinde, Kimberly, Byrne, Jeffrey Atwell, and Ron Bloom. 4 out of 5.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm starting on new business number 2. So start with the annual report, right?
Go ahead.
Okay. Let me just get it up here on my monitor. So this is usually customary at the end of the year just to go over the cases that were heard and also for documentation purposes. It's part of the zoning code that we have to do this. So I generated the annual zoning or ZBA report, and we had 6 cases that were heard on throughout this year. January 6, 2020 was the adult use cannabis text amendment, which felt ages ago before the pandemic happened. Things were very different. Our biggest concern was cannabis. Now it's different. We have different concerns. April 2nd, 2020 was the Charles Comerford application for a special use for Lopez Tire Shop. July 2nd, 2020, we had Victor Lozano for a parking variance for Puerto Marisco, which was the first hearing because that was continued to another meeting night. In between July 2nd to August 6th, we had a special meeting. July 29, 2020, Terry Schuneman, which was the Coach House appeal from the building official's decision or determination. And then on August 6, 2020, on our regularly scheduled meeting night, we had Victor Lozano, his parking variance for Puerto Marisco, the second hearing where it was approved with conditions that they come back to us 6 months after opening up their business. And then we also had that same night Taylor Ali Ziad, the special use for Tires R Us, which is a business on Western Avenue, directly across the street from Popeyes. And then on November 5th, which was last month, we heard as a group Ophelia Smith Evans, text amendment, special use, and parking variance for Ophelia's Banquet, with the condition for parking variance that they come back to us 6 months after a big event, when that big event occurs. So out of the year, we were much busier than planning. Planning only had 4 cases. We had 6. So let's see, we had 1 text amendment. We had two text amendments heard. We also heard 1 special use, 2 special use, 3 special uses, including Ophelia. Then we had 2 variances, right? Victor Lozano's and Ophelia Smith Evans. And then we also had the appeal, the zoning appeal, which was an anomaly, but it happens. Part of the zoning code, if someone wants to appeal a zoning decision either by the zoning administrator, which would be me in this capacity for zoning purposes, or the building official, a person can appeal directly to the zoning board of appeals. And that happened with Terry Schuneman. So that's the annual report for the ZBA. We were quite busy. We were very busy in the summertime, and then it kind of tapered off. And of course, we missed 2 meetings because we didn't have a full quorum to hear Ophelia's application, but it was eventually heard. If you want me to, I could jump into the second document.
Prior to, I have a question, Howard.
Okay, Jeffrey.
In any of the cases that we deliberated on this year, did the city council elect to act outside of the recommendation of the zoning board?
No, not this year.
Thank you.
That's a good question.
Usually they don't. There was one in 2019, which was that tavern restaurant. It was a special use and a parking variance. It went through planning, zoning, community development, and then it was denied at the city council. That was, one of a particular case that wasn't approved at city council. But nothing this year of anything like that happened. The zoning appeal does not go to the city council. The zoning code dictates that it stops at the zoning board of appeals. The next recourse, if a person wants to, is to go to circuit court if they want to continue fighting an appeal. But in situations like that, there's no city council approval. I'll start the second document discussion.
Howard, if I could just ask a quick question, and this is not anything that we need details on. I'm just curious, how did this year compare with 2019? About the same number of cases, more or less? You have a feel for that?
It was about the same. This year was more challenging because of COVID. It's hard to talk to people in person if we can't anymore. We have to stay in place or shelter in place. More Zoom conversations. I'm having Zoom conversation with prospective developments that might occur next year. So it's tough. It's different. I feel like things have picked up more from the summer moving forward. With new development, people want to get things done. For example, there are three projects that might be coming to our zoning board of appeals. The former Metro South Hospital, special uses, a master plan review. 1 lot into 8 lots subdivision, which goes through planning and zoning. And then there's another one where there might be building addition for commercial property that might trigger lot coverage variance. So there are things that I'm talking to. I'm communicating either by telephone or Zoom.
Good.
So, yeah.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so if no one has any other questions, I'll start with the second part, the long-range agenda. So, as most of you have heard by now, I'm no longer associated with the building department. Since the summertime, I've been separated from building. So now I have more time and energy to apply for planning and zoning. So this year, 2021, that's coming up, I'd like to really work hard on rewriting the zoning code. I tried to start this year, but because of COVID, because of the cannabis, and because of other things I was doing in the summer, I was also working on a rodent program with the new health inspector and other things that occupied me during the summer, and applying for grants for FEMA for reimbursement for the COVID pandemic, which is keeping me busy, it was a tough summer to dedicate towards the rewrite of the zoning code. But now I'm really focused on starting 2021 with the zoning code. So what I've mentioned in my report, I no longer oversee the building department, which I just mentioned, and now I have more time to focus on zoning. So I listed here the 12 headings or sections of the zoning code that's going to be changed or revised in the rewrite. 11 out of 12 I'm really going to look at seriously. The only one I'm not really going to focus that much is number 9 that deals with signage, because that was rewritten like 3 or 4 years ago, and that's being implemented as I review applications for new signs or new businesses move in. I'm enforcing the new sign code, and you start to see it throughout the Western Avenue and the UTOD. And on Western Avenue between 119th and 127th, new signs are coming up that are more conforming. They're not so outlandish or blatant. So that section of the zoning code I would not like to touch at all. I like just to focus on the 11 other. So I'll start from the very top. Rules and definition. I personally believe that the definition section needs a major overhaul. I've started already working on this. And why do I say it needs a major overhaul? Because when a developer, a business person, an attorney debates with me the use or the definition of a particular use, if we don't have it under the zoning code, then it's to interpretation by either different definition or past court cases. So that always puts us in a terrible position. So I rather have better and more robust zoning definitions in the zoning code. So it's gonna, the zoning code definition section is gonna probably expand. Currently, I counted there are 20 pages. I'm looking between 50 to 70 pages of new definitions. For example, I get a lot of questions about truck terminal, truck parking, auto repair, auto detailing, stuff like that. Banquet hall, affiliates situation is a good example. Indoor versus outdoor entertainment, that needs more tweaking. We should have better definitions for that, arcade versus video gaming or what have you. So I already started working on this. I'm already maybe 40% done on the definition. I still have 60% to go. But that would be one of the first things I would bring up in a quarterly discussion, which I'll discuss later on. But I just wanted to mention the definition section and why I feel like we need to have better definitions. For example, we don't have a definition for a drive-through business. And that bothers me because it's open to drive-in. Drive-in is a place where you can park your car, walk in, or according to the definition that we have here, a drive-in could also be a drive-through. So there needs to be more distinction because, a drive-through might trigger a site plan review versus just a regular business license application review. The second heading, schedule of use controls. This is one where I want to put the uses on a table. So it's easier for anyone to say, hey, I want to open up a restaurant. Is it allowed in a C1? Oh yeah, I see it here on the table. It's a special use, right? Or it's a permitted use versus what we have today, right? You look at the zoning code, you go from industrial 2, industrial 1, C2, C1 to residential. Each one falls into the other code, and that's where errors or mistakes could happen. Because when you follow from one section to another, from one use to another, it's either permitted or special use. So I would like to put everything on a zoning table, just go across the line and see where you fall under the use category and the use you're proposing to open. And that would make it easier. I would also like to include the UTOD. The UTOD was done as a standalone because that was a transit-oriented development district. But it's a zone that should be included in the regular zoning table. So I'm trying to also merge the UTOD criteria with the regular zoning code. So there won't be this question anymore. Oh, I didn't know that the UTOD had different requirements or different responsibilities or permissions of what businesses can or cannot do. So that's another section I like to really focus on. General provisions is just going to be minor tweaks. Bulk regulations, which are setbacks, height, setbacks, lot coverage, open space. I would like to tweak it a little bit. I like to also look at lot coverage. Currently, our lot coverage requirement is any building that inhabits a property. So you might have a primary building, a secondary building, or you might have a shed. I would like to also incorporate driveways or walkways in that, or maybe a deck, or how you call it, a patio. So we really look at the amount of materials covering the ground for stormwater mitigation possible down the road. So that's one of the things I like to tweak. When it comes to section 5, off-street parking and loading facilities, this is another one I'm really interested in looking at tweaking the parking requirements. I had a pretty long conversation with the planning commissioners maybe half hour ago, and they were really concerned about this, especially in the UTOD. Commissioner Berry feels that, parking should be more, I guess, relaxed for businesses so they have an opportunity to open up. I have more of a neutral stance on that. Yes, the UTOD is already built up. There's lots of legacy buildings. I understand that. Maybe in my tweaking, we could use the public parking lots as a place, as a bank for parking. I might also include, on-street parking that's in front of your building or on the side of your building as part of the calculation, or look at different ways to maximize or minimize parking. The UTOD and C1 is the tough one because UTOD basically says parking shouldn't be a factor in case you do more than 20% of rehabilitation or modifications interior, triggers the regular parking. So hence the reason Ophelia Smith Evans had to go through a parking variance, because I calculated between 71 to 90% of her banquet hall was being rebuilt, rehabilitated. So that triggered the regular parking requirements, that triggered the parking variances. But there's been other businesses that I have approved through the business license application in the UTOD that I allowed for retail to retail, retail to a restaurant, if they meet the retail parking, those type of things I've tried to work with the applicants. So it's not a burden to open up a new business. The only time where we have more flexibility in parking where it can be enforced is the C2, your red area on the zoning map, either 127th or western between 119 and 127th. Then, of course, your industrial zones, right? Those areas could incorporate more parking for the uses that they're proposing. So again, this is something that I'm working with the chairperson here. We're looking at parking, strategic level, long-term. So, there's going to be changes to the parking. Home occupation, we should include, or I'm thinking about including other uses that should be included as an occupation, like retail, if it's retail done online. If a person purchases something from you and you just mail it from your house, that should be allowed under home occupation. Currently, we don't allow for retail under home occupation, which makes sense. You don't want to open up a bakery and have people coming to your house to buy cookies or donuts. So I understand why retail is not allowed, but there are different types of retail. If you're on eBay or other types of services, you could probably run a business through your house without disturbing people. Another thing I'd like to also introduce under home occupation is the difference between a minor and a major. A minor would be something I would be able to review. It's pretty mundane. A major one would be something that's a little bit more controversial. A person wants to open up, I don't know, a hair salon in their house, 1 or 2 customers per week. I believe that should be heard at the planning and zoning as a major application, maybe a special use for a home occupation. Currently, we don't allow for that, but there are people asking about things like that. So it's not me, trying to, create new things, but these are the type of questions I get. Planned developments, I like to add more requirements to that. We have 2 areas of the city that could be possibly developed in the near future. One is along the river and canal area, and then the other one is near 119th Street and 119th and Vincennes, right? A brownfield site. I'm looking at, creating new language for big lots or how you call it, large boxes or big box businesses. Looking at creating some language if it's a planned unit development or planned development for commercial, have big box requirements, parking, drainage, landscaping, lighting. So that's one of the things I like to revise. When it comes to section 8 or number 8, yard regulation, those are the sections in the zoning code that allows for minor encroachments into a setback, front, sides, or rear. That deals with roof overhangs, doorways, patios, decks, basement windows, or what have you. I think that needs to be tightened up a little. Again, number 9, signs. I'm not interested in touching it at this go around. Maybe in the future, but not at the moment. Number 10 is one that I also would like to revise, non-conforming building structures and uses. Again, Commissioner Barry from Planning Commission said this is a tough one because it's controversial. It could go either way, Like I explained, if it's a pre-existing non-conformity that was built before zoning codes or building codes were in place, and a person discontinues the use for half a year, 6 months, or it gets destroyed by acts of God, and it gets rebuilt more than 50% of the property value or house value or building value, or it gets expanded, then that nonconformity is lost and then it has to conform to today's codes. Now, the example I also give, if a person applies for a special use, so let's say a funeral home in a residential zone, that special use goes on in perpetuity. You can have different owners, but the property will always be a funeral home. So there will be no nonconformities lost or no nonconformities being placed on special uses or variances that were approved by your zoning board. So that's one I like to tweak, because there are lots of pages that talks about percentages or square footage of losses. I find that to be very cumbersome, very confusing. I've worked in other municipalities where you could say more with less. And I have good examples that I've reviewed in other municipalities that I would like to include in this section under nonconformities. Number 11 is the performance standards applicable to all districts. This is kind of an iffy one. There might be some changes. These are requirements. If you want to, let's say, open up a daycare, there should be some requirements that should be required when a person does do something like this. Amount of dedicated open space, an area for pickups or drop-offs. So stuff like that, I would like to tweak it a little. And then the final one is administration and enforcement. So this is a good one where this came up very, very well during the zoning appeal for the coach house. Currently under administration, the building commissioner is the one that issues a certification on zoning. It should be someone like me, the zoning administrator, not the building commissioner. So those are things that I like to change. I do believe that the building commissioner, which that term is no longer used also, it's building official, but the code still calls it building commissioner. I believe that the building official should have a say on a zoning review if it's necessary under building, but not under zoning. Because it was a zoning interpretation that was challenged by the building official for Terry Schuneman. So that's a good example where that needs to be worked on. Now, 11 out of these 12 headings that I just spoke about, I'm interested in working on them in a quarterly manner, tackling little by little, and also conferring with our legal attorneys, right? Because some of them have legal implications. So I'm also going to verify that legally what I'm proposing is allowed. I'm very astute with the state statutes, what we can do and can't do. So more or less, I have a feel of what can be done without getting us in a lawsuit. Now, further down in this report, I talk about presenting to the planning and zoning 4 times quarterly report. The first one would be presented on March 4, 2021. The second one, June 3rd, 2021. The third one, September 2nd, 2021. And then the final one, December 2, 2021. And what this would be like a quarterly or progress report. So, the first quarter would probably be me presenting, a working draft of the definition and use table, right? So both planning and zoning could start to review, could start to ask questions, and if it needs to be discussed further, we could have it in a regularly scheduled meeting, or we could have a special meeting to discuss it further. But at least to show progress is being made. On my side, that I'm going to try and hit the target date to have this delivered to planning and zoning for a preliminary review by the end of the year. Why? Because this marks the 50th anniversary of when the original zoning code, ordinance number 2151, was enacted. So I like to at least hit that 50-year period where we have a working document that can be further reviewed in 2022, but at least most of it's done in 2021. So that's my target. That's going to be very ambitious on my part, but I like to work on that. Now, usually when a new ordinance or a zoning ordinance gets revised, it has to go through planning, zoning, community development, and city council as a text amendment. So it's going to go through that process at the final portion of it. But what I'm presenting in the quarterly meetings will be very preliminary discussion items, directions that the board might feel I should be looking more at. And then once I have the whole document pretty much written out as a draft, then to present it to planning and zoning and to the other committees, community development, judicial, municipal services, finance, so everyone has a say. And once everyone has their say, then hopefully, and I think this will happen in 2022 in the beginning of the year, have some public meetings with the general public charrettes, just to go over the new document before it gets presented officially as a text amendment for a new ordinance moving forward, right? An amendment to the existing ordinance that's being changed. I call it a rewrite. Some people want to call it a revision. I call it a rewrite because I'm going to change a lot of sections or ways things were interpreted in the past. So for me, it's like a new zoning code. But for communication's sake, it's going to be a text amendment. And finally, input from everyone. That's what I'm going to be looking for. So does anyone have any questions on this document, the long-range agenda for 2021?
I've got a question. So you've laid this out really well, and I'm really excited because rather than just being sort of reactive, this kind of, to me, looks a little more proactive in trying to address some of the challenges that we have seen in our hearings, but also some of the challenges that having old code or multiple versions of old code bring, us to interpret, people to interpret, applicants to interpret. So I think that's a great a great opportunity to move us forward. And I love it that it's being done on the 50th anniversary. So it's, kind of a nice timing. But I also had a question. You have done a little bit of work so far, correct,
Yes.
on this?
Yes. I've over the last half a year, I've been looking at other ordinances in Illinois, large communities, small communities, looking at nonconformities, looking at parking standards, looking at definitions. I have to be careful because sometimes I have to mimic the definition at the state level for a particular use. So that comes in for like these types of uses that we have here, like family home versus other types of homes where you have different adults living together under the same roof. That I have to be very careful. There was a revision by Jason Berry maybe 5 years ago, 2015. That number pops in my head that tries to tackle that. So I'm also going to look at that too. Because we do get questions about these types of homes. One is, the type of home that you have people with blue cap, with disabilities like that. And then you have other types of homes where you have people recovering from addiction. So each one is a different definition, different responsibilities or requirements. So those are the ones I have to mimic very closely what the state says are allowed. Now, just to piggyback on what the chairman mentioned, yeah, this is the rewrite of the zoning code. My big vision here is to create a land development code. When I say land development, I'm talking about zoning, planning, subdivision, site plan, and environmental regulations all in one code. Large cities have that. So you look at one code, hey, I got to look at a subdivision. You go to the subdivision section. If you're looking for zoning, you go to the zoning section. And if you're looking for environmental or site plan related stuff, you could go there. Currently, if you go under American Legal on the city's website, building has a code, zoning has a code, environmental landscaping has a code. The subdivision is there, but is reserved. So I like to eventually tie everything together. But the first stab is to look at the zoning code because that needs the most work. And then second plan is the comprehensive plan, the long range plan. And then the third part is the land development plan. Incorporates planning and zoning and other requirements, subdivision and site plan, all in one document. So there will be no ambiguity. A person could just go online and look up site plan requirements to submit a site plan, preliminarily or final, or a subdivision. So that's my grand vision. But right now I'm going to work on the zoning code.
I have just one more comment. When you are redefining these definitions, will you also be providing sites, examples, standards, where, in other words, that help you kind of derive the response that you will be providing for us to review?
Oh,
in other words, how defensible are you looking to make these?
So my definitions process is twofold. Fold one is to look at municipalities in Illinois. The second fold is to look at municipalities in the country. East Coast versus West Coast. Do they call the same things with the same names? For example, I've seen definition in the West Coast that goes more into more details about new companies, new uses that we're not familiar with. So I'm going to be looking at both levels, at the state level and national level. A good portion of my definitions will come from the American Planning Association, They have an online library that I'm allowed to look at definitions about the same topic or use, how other communities throughout the country views it. So I'm looking at that. Concurrently looking at, what's a proper, division between a drive-through versus a drive-in restaurant, right? We have nothing in our definition that talks about daycare. Children daycare versus adult daycare is very different. So I'm looking at definitions like that. So yes, the definition section is going to expand tremendously in my rewrite, but I need it because if a developer comes to me and says, I want to open up an adult daycare, we have a definition that's in the zoning code that both sides will agree on. This is the definition versus, no, I'm going to use the definition that they use in another community, which might disadvantage us or lead us into trouble legally. So I'm trying to catch as many things as possible under definitions. So in my definitions, I'm going to probably annotate where I got it or from what section or from where. But for example,
that's what I'm looking for is you will be presenting us with something to look at, but any annotations for how it was derived, I think, from a defensibility, I think would be a good idea.
Yeah. And that might be, ongoing. My idea is to get at least a draft definition to the group by March 4th, right, 2021. There might be more annotations throughout the different quarters, but I'll work on that. My idea is to try and knock off, at least 3 or 4 headings per quarter. It's going to be challenging. Hopefully I'll have time. Hopefully I don't have a lot of things occupying me on a day-to-day at a micro level, but that's what I'm working on.
Can I make a suggestion? You've got these quarterly dates. I'm going to assume these are
regular
which dates. You're going to be. I'm leading into my segue. These are meeting. Okay, so you're going to get it to us, for example, March 4th for the. Okay, so for the March 4th date, any possible way we can get it to us a little sooner on that one, or before the meeting dates that you have here for the quarter, so we can take a look at it and come to the meetings prepared.
Yeah, my idea was to do a presentation. So it'll be like, hey, this is the new zoning definition. We went from 20 pages to 70 pages, small type. It might seem long and arduous, but it's going to protect us because the better municipalities have these definitions. And then, we could discuss it. But if you want me to present the definitions maybe 2 weeks, I can. Or at least if I'm 75, 85% done, I can. What I've noticed is we have definitions everywhere. And I'm still trying to gather if I should put it all under one heading of definition or break it up into sections. So for example, in our flood mitigation ordinance, we have lots of definition that deals with flood hazard area, FEMA related definition. Should these definitions that are very particular be in our general definition? I think the answer is no. The same goes for signs. I feel like the sign definition should fall under the zoning code, under signs, under the sign section. These are the definitions that you have to look at. Pole sign, monument sign, wall sign. The same thing when it goes to sexual-oriented businesses, right? The current code has sexual-oriented businesses in the regular definition. I like to break up the definition into smaller definitions and maybe have one section that dedicates towards building terminology, which ties in with the building code.
Okay, so I don't know what sexual-oriented businesses are, but I'm sure you'll have something for us to take a look at, and we'll help you discuss it.
Well,
tell you what, based on time, if we could kind of move forward, are there any other questions based on the long-range planning?
Right. Just to get back on sector-oriented businesses, if you look at the current code, you'll see definitions that talk about that type of industry in a regular code, in the zoning code. So it is there. It's not me
No doubt.
fabricating it.
No doubt. No doubt.
I do have one comment, Howard. First of all, thank you for taking this on to tackle it. It's clearly there's a lot of work to be done, and I appreciate the chairman's comment about getting us information before the meeting. I think that'll be help. I made a note of just a couple of things that you had talked about, which I think are really critically important. One is clarification, so that we've got, a code, a set of each of these sections that minimizes subjective interpretation. I think that's important. The other is ease of use. I think with a long-range plan of being a community environment, a business environment that is attractive for developers, that is attractive for investors, having something that is clear, straightforward, and easy, and ease of use is going to be really, really important. So thank you for that.
So that's a good example you just mentioned, a code that is attractive to businesses. So if you look at the current zoning uses that is allowed in the city, it's very rudimentary. It's like restaurant, bar, tavern, truck terminal, warehouse. Today we have different types of business, different types of terminologies. If these uses were mentioned and permitted, then when people look at the zoning code, it says, oh, yeah, I want to open this type of a use. Currently, if you look at the code today, it's not allowed. And this is where we start getting into, I need a definition for truck terminal that's more robust versus truck parking versus banquet versus convention center. So those are the uses I like to introduce, uses that might be more popular in different parts of the country that could work here versus the standard uses that you see in Illinois. So for example, there might be several classification under auto repair. Tires R Us was a good example, right? According to our zoning definition, any manipulation to the car triggers that auto repair. But they're not really doing auto repair. They're doing more cosmetic improvements to a vehicle. Maybe we need to have a third definition that talks about that. So then a person could simply apply for a special use for that.
I totally agree. Are there any other questions, quick questions?
For the rewrite, no. Just keep in mind, just like I told the planning commissioners, this is going to be a long, arduous process. This is going to be a constant conversation. It's not like, okay, Howard developed it, it's going to get approved. No, it has to go through a public process. We need to have the public buy-in. Businesses, officials, residents, everybody.
Totally agree. Totally agree. That sounds like the right path. Can you maybe can you review the ZBA hearing schedule for next year?
Sure. So, let me just get it up.
And then also talk about the training.
Yes. So, what's common practice is instead of, like we have on our website when I first started 2 years ago, zoning meets on the first Thursday of every month. I think it's good practice to have some type of a schedule so the public could view it, either at the building department's office, on the wall, or on the website. Which I like to do is break it up into 3 dates, and I'll explain it to everyone here. The application date is the date I would like to see a new application given to me, either by email or in person or by mail. This gives me at least 1 week to determine if the application is complete. For example, a person wants to do a special use and they haven't submitted an architectural plan. Within that week, I could tell quickly, yes, you have complied with all the requirements, or maybe no, you cannot be heard later in the month, or the following month because you haven't met that requirement. So usually the application date is always a week before the legal publication date. The legal publication date is the date that I have to advertise for the Zoning Board of Appeals. So what the state says that I cannot advertise no more than 30 days into the future and no less than 15 days before a hearing is heard. So the legal publication date pretty much is the 15 days before a meeting is heard. So if you look at the first line, by December 15th, in 12 days, I should receive an application for a person to be heard on January 7th, right? Next year. By the 22nd, right before Christmas, I have to advertise it. So that makes it easy for everybody. It makes it easy for the business owner, property owner, a resident that they have to apply for a variance. At least they have an understanding how it goes. The dates are the same for the Planning Commission. The only change is the time. The Planning Commission meets at 6:30. The Zoning Board meets at 7:30. The only change that I've done in this schedule versus last year is to include the COVID-19 pandemic material for Zoom calls and participation, the username and password. So it makes it easier for anyone who wants to participate. They can participate. So all of the meeting dates fall nicely on the first Thursday, except for the one in April. What should fall on April 1st turns out to be Holy Thursday, religious holiday. So I decided to have the date of the following week. So it's the second Thursday, April 8th, is when we'll have a meeting. That's the only anomaly out of the meeting dates. Everything else falls or corresponds with the first Thursday. Now, what the state says is that legally we should have a schedule published. When I say published, either a copy on the wall, a copy on the website that states this. So there's no ambiguity or no difference in opinion what's the correct date or when something should be heard. And I usually provide this when I'm talking to people who are in the process of applying for a special use or variance. I give them a copy of this and I go over this with the people, either the building owner, property owner, or business owner, or a resident that's doing a fence variance for the zoning board, right? So that's my schedule. So I think no one really has any questions or any suggestions to change it. Yeah?
I have a question. Based on the application date, can you, and you may have been doing this, but I wasn't paying attention to the details around it, but based on the application date, if you don't receive an application or you do receive an application, can you alert us by this particular date to let us know if there's going to be a hearing or an application review on the meeting date, the next meeting date?
Yes.
So that, one, will be prepared that, something's coming down the path and we may need to set aside some time to read, or no, there isn't one. And so we won't be receiving anything probably until a few days before the meeting,
right?
About what the meeting's about.
Right. So
I would greatly appreciate that.
I will. I will, as I get applications on the application date, I will communicate with the zoning board. Just keep in mind that the application date is the only item on the list that is really something that I created to just have some type of allowance. I've worked in communities that are large where I receive a FedEx package for a variance for a setback. I never communicated with the attorney. I never communicated with anyone. They sent it to me because they know that the application date is that date. They know they want to be heard on the following month. And it works. Here, I really don't have that situation. I usually have preliminary meetings. And like I've mentioned before, if something big is coming up, I'll mention to everybody. from one meeting to another. But the application date, so for example, if someone submits something on December 17th, I'm not going to penalize that person because they didn't meet my artificial date. I'll still review it, but it just gives me less time to make a determination, and it just
Okay.
impacts them to be hearing it on January 7th.
Great.
So,
Does anybody have any
example-
questions?
So for example,
Howard, based on time, can we maybe hold that thought?
just a quick one.
Appreciate it.
Just a quick
Okay.
one. For example, December 15th, 12 days from now, I haven't received anything. If I receive something, I'll notify everyone.
Great. Thank you. Because that date is coming up. Any other questions or comments from anybody else? Okay. Howard, there was one other announcement that you wanted to make regarding the training.
Yes. So I've also mentioned it to the Planning Commission, and I'm now mentioning to the Zoning Board of Appeals. This is something that Kimberly and I decided to introduce. This wasn't being done before, is to have some type of a legal training on how we should be conducting our hearings, our meetings, and stuff like that. So Carrie Horvath has volunteered to provide us with a training session on January 7th, which would be our first Thursday of the year, of the first month of the year. I don't have any applications coming. Most likely there's no application. So that will give us time at the beginning of the year to go over this. What I suggested it to the planning, I'm going to suggest it to zoning, is that we have a combined meeting. And I will advertise it in a proper manner for the Open Meetings Act. Combine planning and zoning, discussion on hearings. So both planning and zoning will tune in at 6:30, and it'll go till 7:30 or 8 o'clock, as long as people have questions and they want to have more information provided to them by the attorney, by Carrie, is to have a combined session on January 7th. I haven't received any materials yet. I've asked for it. Carrie will provide materials, I guess, closer towards the end of the year, towards next year. I'll try to get the materials out to you as quickly as possible. And this is a training, that talks about, what's considered a quorum. How do you hear an applicant? How much time do you give an applicant? Do you swear in an applicant? If there is a question, can you table the meeting? How should it be advertised? These are the types of things we're going to be discussing.
I personally think this is a really good idea. We've got new members. I personally am a new member. Haven't been a member for that long, and what I've seen, I had to bleed a little bit in the last meeting. I'm still bleeding, so I greatly appreciate the opportunity to learn properly how things should be done, and I think this is a good idea. And not only that, but I've recommended also that this be taped, so that as new members come and go, that this material is available to new members, both on the planning and zoning committees, boards, to help new members acclimate to the roles and responsibilities, and also just help us really better understand, since none of us are attorneys, what are the things we should be thinking about at hearings more than maybe what we've been doing. So I applaud the city for allowing this to happen and bringing this to us hopefully, I'm thinking January is a good time from a standpoint of it's slow, it's quiet, it's just after the holidays and things are somewhat slow, so it's a good time to start up the year for everyone to kind of better set themselves for the meetings to come. So are there any questions?
Yeah, I just have a comment. I absolutely agree. Training as much as we can along the way, is critical. We talk about the compliance with the Open Meetings Act, certainly. My only question in a training session with the span of what we're going to be focused on, it could run long. There could be many questions. There could be different things. Is it a requirement to do it in a public forum, or is there another forum that we might want to consider as well outside of our regular meeting schedule, so that in the event we do have something coming up in January, we're not rushed to go through that?
No, it's always in a public forum. In other communities during better times, if people from the public wanted to sit in and listen, they can. In this situation, it's going to probably be us on YouTube. So it's going to be kind of closed, but it's still open to the public. It's always in an open process because we're having a meeting. And this meeting should be open.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is it a meeting or is it a training session? I mean, I guess maybe
I call it
a
meeting. A meeting because we're going to meet on the meeting date. It's a training session.
So we probably have to clarify that in the agenda.
Yes.
It is still, because you are conducting business of the city, even though it's training, it's still considered a meeting, so it has to be published according to the Open Meetings Act, yes.
Okay. So if we do have other matters before, that are brought before us for that meeting, we'll just have to modify accordingly.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be anything new because I haven't spoken to anything about anything coming in January. Just any stuff that the chairman wants to bring. She could discuss it under comments from the chairman, but it'll be basically a training.
Good,
Do
thank
you
you.
all think that this is helpful? That this would be something that would be of value?
Yes.
Okay, does anybody have any more questions about what we've just discussed? Are there any board member concerns?
I don't have a concern. It's more of a question, and it's really a follow on to our initial meeting that we had. And again, we spent a lot of time talking about a lot of things. I think it was important. Certainly want to make these meetings as efficient as we can. My understanding from the outcome of that meeting was the next step for Ophelia's Banquets was to be going before community development. Is that still, do we know, Howard, is that still on track? Is that still on schedule?
Yes. So I've forwarded the information to Ahmed Sandino. He had a deadline of Wednesday, which was yesterday, for me to submit everything for the next meeting, which is next Wednesday. I've submitted everything. I've copied the chairman because if she wants to participate, she can. I'll be there. Later that night, I had Alex Leufman also email me, and I conveyed to Alex, community development first and then city council. It's going to be very tight. I've already forwarded my materials, the findings of fact and my recommendation letters, my staff report and supporting documents to our legal team to create the 3 ordinances in conjunction with community development of the vote counts. I need that. The minutes from community development for it to be at city council. The challenge is this. We have technically 2 days to turn everything around from Wednesday's meeting to Friday's day of disseminating the information to the city council. I'm trying to work with the legal side to create something. So, once community development hears it, we already just modify some documents and it's ready to go. I already conveyed it to both Alex Leufman, Linda Goldberg, their attorney, and Ophelia, the business owner. There is a possibility it might be the second Tuesday in January that the case might be heard at community development at city council, not community development. So there is a possibility.
Due to that short time frame.
It's a very short time.
Mhm.
I know Carrie and Kelly do not like to work on under a 2-day time frame, especially something where 3 ordinances have to be created, where we're dealing with a definition, we're dealing with the way or the process where it's going to be allowed in the zone, and also the parking variance requirement, right? Come back to us in 6 months after a first major event.
Makes sense.
Is there anything that would preclude other attendees at that meeting? For example, I would like to attend to observe.
Yeah, once the liaison to the community development, Ahmed Sandino, forwards me the agenda, I'll forward it to everyone because I'm not sure where it's going to fall on the agenda. I actually have 2 things that I have to discuss in this agenda at community development. One deals with signage for Taqueria Jalisco, and then the second one is Ophelia stuff. They also want to participate. Alex, Linda, and Ophelia.
Okay, good.
I have a quick question. Howard, you mentioned after the meeting there were some other reviews that you were going to be doing, I guess, kind of in between the ZBA and community development meeting, other details, other checklists. Will you share with us, maybe not now, but maybe in an email or something, what your findings were? For example, I had asked in our ZBA meeting that Alex Leisman present you with his appeal for his property taxes. I don't know what the status of that is. There may be other things that you were looking into, such as the trash, where the trash was going to be located. So there, just to make a short list and not to go into detail, but if we could get some idea of what you learned or explored or uncovered or determined between our findings and what's going to be presented at the community development, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Yeah. So just to answer quickly, the first one is no. Second one is no. I need to reach out to Alex Leifman, especially his attorney, for that information because that's still missing. I was going to ask for it later this week, tomorrow, Friday. The trash enclosure, since it wasn't a condition by planning or zoning, it's going to be a discussion item between me and the building official during the building permit process.
Right.
She's going to have to build something, and building is going to be the lead on that.
Okay. There may be other things because I tried to keep it as concise as possible. We could have gone on for another hour or more with some of the extended list of things that we had questions about. So, but they were not really in the zoning, the planning, and the zoning requirements section. So that's just what I was interested in learning more about.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn our meeting?
This is Ron. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mike, I'll second it.
Thank you. Roll call, please. Jeff, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Kimberly Byrne,
Aye.
Jeff Atwell, aye. Ron Bloom,
Aye.
Mike Sinde.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
Okay, the meeting is concluded at 8:40. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night and weekend, and see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.